It is a and it's a good Monday indeed. Andrea, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
You're doing all right? Good. I'm glad you're here with us today.
I'm
Um,
Monday.
so the recording just started, so I'm going to jump right in. My name is Scott Rutter. I am the founder of New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. We were founded in 2016, and our mission for the longest time has been advocating for the expansion of medical marijuana, advocating for decriminalization, advocating eventually for adult use. We took a critical part of the campaign for legalization, and a lot of positive things have been going on in the world of cannabis. Businesses are going, all these wonderful things. Medical expansion has occurred. New conditions have happened. But the one thing that's still dragging right now is home grow for patients. So Senator Troy Singleton, I want to thank you very much for being here with us today. And also thank you for your leadership and your sponsorship on this very important issue.
Well, first of all, thank you, Scott. And let me just say, it is a privilege to be with you. We've been friends, we've been colleagues for a long time, and I want to just say at the outset, all that you've done to grow this industry and advocate for the cannabis industry in this state. There's not enough words of thanks that I and so many others can say for the mission that you led and with so many others. So I want to start with that, with getting that out there up front. I would be remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to Kristen, who's with us, one of my many LD7 bosses and founder of Tricom Analytical, for her advocacy as well, and frankly for extending an invitation for me today to be here. She's always been a thoughtful voice in this ongoing conversation around cannabis access, and I'm excited to be here with you all. I think the premise of Scott, of your initial question and the commentary around home grow is important. Over the past several years, I've worked legislatively to not only try and make the cannabis industry more equitable for those entrepreneurs seeking economic opportunity, but also to make it more affordable and accessible for those who rely on it for their medicine and beyond. And it's no secret that our state has the highest medical and recreational cannabis pricing, which is one of the reasons why I've been such a vocal advocate for home grow. Because I think it presents a unique opportunity for us to allow individuals to have home cultivation of cannabis, essentially at this outset for medical patients. And it talks about the number of plants and how many you can do, both mature and immature, and the legislation speaks to all that. But essentially, why it's so critically important is that in every state in which we've allowed both medical and recreational, there's always been a home grow component. New Jersey is an outlier in that regard. And for us to continue to be an outlier is a source of immense frustration and I'll be candid, embarrassment as a policymaker, as I continue to beat the drum and haven't been able to gain the consensus of my colleagues to move that forward. But the fight continues, as was known. Scott, you led this fight, and so many others led this fight for years and years and years when the topic was taboo. And it took us a long time to get there, but it was the persistence and diligence of so many who were able to make that happen. And I think this is another fight in which we're going to have to continue in doing that. So we're going to continue on that journey. But the home grow issues is a bugaboo of mine personally
Yeah.
that I'm hopeful that we're able to get resolved.
And it's true. I mean, I've seen you in a whole bunch of different scenarios, chambers of commerce, things that have nothing to do with cannabis. And you always come back to this as a very important issue, one of your top issues. And it comes from a level of compassion, but also education. So question to you is, like, when did you start in your journey? I mean, that we voted in 2009 for legalization of medical marijuana, and Governor Christie came in and kind of stunted the growth of this as a program. But education is, I think, key to all this. You created this bipartisan bill. You even have Robert Singer, Senator Singer, as a sponsor of the bill, who was adamantly opposed to all things cannabis. And I assume education had a lot to do with it. What's your perspective on how we're getting this to become more of a bipartisan effort?
So I think as the mores around cannabis has changed, I think has led us to have a different type of conversation. I think for many of us, whether it's from a criminal justice aspect, have recognized what the war on drugs have done to communities and realized how misguided and misplaced it was with time being our guide on that one, you sort of understand and reevaluate positions that one may have had early on in life. And I think for my colleagues who perhaps are a little bit more conservative, I think when they've looked at their constituency, because it's no longer that this doesn't affect the people that vote for me, right?
Right on.
It becomes something that affects us all. And unfortunately, in so many of our body politic, and Scott, to his credit, has now graduated from this crazy world in which we live in. It's like people think too often from election to election and not really focus on what's in the best interest of people. But I think now that time has evolved and we've seen the bipartisan nature of folks coming together around this topic, we're able to have an honest conversation around the merits of what cannabis means for patients and have an honest conversation around that we can be both focused on making sure we have a safe society without putting us in a position to ignore the fact that this medicine is so critically important to people. And I think when you talk about it in that context and you have other voices come together and talk about it, even some of the most hardened conservatives that may be in our state and some of the most liberal find common ground on this issue
Amazing.
pretty cleanly.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that in the legislation and the sponsorship that we have on many of the bills that we've done around cannabis, as well as the voting patterns.
Yeah, it is one of those common denominators for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. How did you get here? Libertarian viewpoints, conservative viewpoints, compassionate liberal viewpoints. I mean, all kind of bringing people together to understand that this is just a plant and a plant has benefits.
Yes.
And it benefits people like Andrea here. Andrea, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I'm hanging in there as best I can. I
Tell us about your journey. Tell us about what's going on with you and how important home grow is for you specifically and patients in general.
Well, on one hand, I'm always, gonna have a positive outlook and say like, I'm doing great because I'm still out here doing this. And I've been off pharmaceuticals for over 6 years. I have epilepsy and permanent progressive brain damage. They had me on track for a brain surgery with not favorable outcomes, and the medicine, the cocktail of pharmaceuticals I was on left me with an unsatisfactory quality of life, to say the least. I had started using cannabis just to keep food in my stomach, which was a side effect of the medicine, and over time was able to find strain-specific medicines and high-potency concentrates that allowed me to actually come off of all of the pharmaceuticals. And it's been over 6 years without pharmaceuticals. And when I have access to the medicine, I have a quality of life better than the doctors ever could have predicted, but access is not consistent. A lot of the strains I need are not found in dispensaries and commercial markets because they don't have high enough yield and high enough market appeal. I need to do custom breeding projects in order to refine the strains I need. Home grow would be the only option for that and the only option to make this medicine remotely affordable, because with serious conditions, it's often recommended to be at 1 gram a day of RSO, which is a high potency ethanol extract. And I currently use about 1 gram a day of solventless rosin, live rosin, which is difficult and very expensive in the current market.
Yeah.
It's amazing the potential that this medicine holds, but it's also amazing the ignorance and stigma we're still faced with in 2024 with the lack of hospital access, the lack of home grow, a lack of really safe options for medicine at this point.
And that's the thing that bothers me the most about this whole discussion is that you have the opportunity to grow your own medicine. And it's very disruptive to a lot of different industries, but it's critically important to you. And I can tell you, as both a dispensary operator and as the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association business group, we want you to have access to the medicine that you need. Someday insurance is going to take care of things. Someday it's going to be a low price copay. Evolution will occur. Education will happen. Senator Singleton's bill will get passed and signed into law. But until that time, I mean, we need you to have access to the medicine that you need. And I know, Kristen, you spent a lot of time on the advocacy trail, and you've been talking to, patients like Andrea and others who, my father has leukemia, by the way. That's a relatively new information. And I, made sure that he got access to RSO, the oil, just to help him with his nausea, help him with his sleeping, help him with the anxiety of having leukemia. He's 80 years old. He puts a little bit on his cracker, a little piece on his cracker, he eats a cracker, and he helps deal with his ongoing issues. Kristen, you've been on the campaign trail for advocacy for home grow for a long time. What is it that you're seeing, and how do you see things progressing?
Yeah, so I initially got involved in the home grow movement after talking to Andrea and some other
And before you could do that, tell us what do you do for a living? Like, how
Sure.
are you in the cannabis space?
Right. So I'm the founder of Trichome Analytical. We're the first licensed cannabis testing facility located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. That was licensed by the state in about 2022 for adult use. But prior to that, we were testing under the medical program. And prior to that, we were testing under for USDA hemp. Well, we continue to test for USDA hemp, but we have been operating now for over 4 years in both the hemp cannabis and high THC cannabis industries in New Jersey. We are a locally owned and operated laboratory. So I see firsthand sort of like even just the chemical composition differences between cultivars that are produced within a commercial program, and then some, R&D or personal use samples that are submitted from outside of a personal use or medical program. And even just the ratios and prevalence of minor cannabinoids are very different, which they elicit different medicinal effects as well. But the commercial THC market really is geared towards high THC potency flower, concentrates, edibles. It's not really taking into account that holistic full extract view that you can get from more small batch cultivars, cultivars that take a little bit longer to harvest, like maybe upwards of 90 days to really fully produce, and they maybe have like lower yields as well, because you do see that minor cannabinoid production exhibit in the plant later into the cultivation cycle. So I was coming from that perspective of realizing the trends within the market in New Jersey, as well as just what I see from the testing data around the country, and how it differs between states that do allow home cultivation and personal use samples and things like that. I was contacted by the New Jersey Bar Association Cannabis Subcommittee back in, I think it was October or November, and they had questioned the safety of homegrown cannabis. And I think the concerns from them at that time, it came up in a conversation that, well, it's not tested and therefore it is not safe. But the same goes for any food in the supermarket that you purchase that you can grow in your own garden. You're not testing your tomatoes or anything like that, but you can. And you can also test your homegrown cannabis in New Jersey if this bill does pass, because New Jersey did allow in the testing regulations for the testing of personal use cannabis, which is huge. Not all states do that, especially those without adult use programs. They don't allow consumers to perform their own testing on their material. But in New Jersey, they specified that you can actually test that. So once I had clarified that for that committee, I actually wrote an op-ed with one of the lawyers from that group, and that kind of started the ball rolling on me connecting with more advocacy groups and getting more involved. Scott, I've known you for years. I think we started Trichome, at least concept-wise, in 2018. We're coming from industrial hygiene, environmental testing into cannabis testing. And so laser focused on achieving our initial primary goals, like getting our businesses up and running, making sure that there's safe product, tested product on the market for consumers, so that they can really gauge the types of products that they need and be able to track that and get what they needed for their specific condition. But taking a step back and looking at the industry as a whole and where we are going and where we can go, and making sure that to minimize impact to consumers and like the legacy market, and getting everyone on board, promoting social equity, safety, the transition from legacy to legal, and not forgetting patients along the way. And I feel like we have forgotten patients along the way. You know, the first adult use operators in the state were extended ATCs from the medical side, and we saw a lot of complaints at that time from medical patients. We saw the enrollment drop from, I think it was over 120,000. Now we're sitting around 70,000 patients. We lost 30 or 50,000 patients within, I think, just the last year. So making sure to, you know, establish a business in New Jersey, even if you're catering towards the adult use recreational market, not forgetting about the medical patients in the state and how to properly provide access. And home cultivation goes a long way in providing access to the patients in New Jersey, where they can not only cultivate medicine that they can afford and maintain the genetics of, but also find new cultivars that may help them a little bit better than some currently on the market.
So I can tell you, you know, what's sold in my store is what's available. That's it. I mean, I don't have a lot of options. And, you know, a patient can come in and ask for a specific strain, and they have. So we're adult use, but patients come in and we cater to patients. We offer discounts. In fact, if you're a patient, you can get 22% off here at Township Green. So you get automatic discount for patients. But they ask for specific strains like you need, Andrea, and that's something that I can't guarantee, and I can't guarantee. I may want to, but what's available is different. Senator, you know, education seems to be the key thing here. What Kristen was just saying, you know, what about the safety factors of growing your own cannabis? Well, what's about the safety factors of growing my own tomatoes, my own, whatever, pumpkins in the backyard? Like what is the reaction that you were getting when you're talking to your colleagues? Because this is where this winds up, right? This is going to wind up in the Assembly and the Senate and getting that center mass of people to want to engage in this. What conversations are you having on this?
So I think, and it's a great question, because the conversations have evolved and changed and pivoted over the last several years, last maybe 2 years or so. Initially, it was, we have this nascent recreational industry. We don't want to upset it, so let's not add home grow to the mix at the same time, was one somewhat of a fallacy of a conversation that had evolved that we've been able to, I think, aggressively and push back on. There was the secondary conversation. I think you talked about the safety aspect of things. Well, what happens if someone grows something and it becomes harmful and can or harm them or others? And I funny you mentioned the tomato story, because it was a very similar conversation I had one of my colleagues, because I was like, I fancy myself as someone who likes to go to farmers markets. And I've never asked one person at a farmer's market when I bought tomatoes, hey, have you tested that tomato before I buy it to make sure it's good? Because I'm putting it in my Caesar salad, I'm putting it in a salad later, and I want to make sure it's all good to go. Like, I've never had that conversation. But we create these different set of rules when we have this conversation around cannabis. And Scott, you recall, it's no different when we talked about how we would be able to allow depreciation of business expenses. I had this conversation with my colleagues, like, it's a business. We are very comfortable as a state of New Jersey taking revenue from that business, but we should also be in a position to allow those businesses to be able to make the proper deductions as any other business would do.
Right on.
It took us a year to get folks to understand that concept, as radical as it is, that two businesses should be treated the same. So that's the kind of dialogue that we have with our colleagues. It is continued education. And it's one of the things we got to stay persistent and diligent around it. Every now and then you get frustrated. You're like, I keep having the same conversation. But I hearken back to all of those who started on this journey to get cannabis legal, and they were able to continue that fight. So for me, it's continue engaging in these conversations over and over again, dispel myths around testing and safety, dispel myths around that it'll destroy an industry. I think to me, there's no better example, Scott, than you sitting here as a retail owner saying, I think there's a place for home grow, and it should be in the paradigm of the cannabis industry in our state. And there are other responsible owner operators who feel the same way. Not all, but there are some, many who do. And that's when we got to continue to push back on the false narratives.
Yeah, and I think when you do talk to the owner operators, the small ones, right? Those of us who came on board recently, none of us are impacted by home grow being legal. right?
Right.
We all kind of recognize that because, we all came into this, most of us anyway, came into this with passion. We really, we appreciate the plant, the benefits of the plant. And yes, those of us who want to make some money too, that's great.
Mhm.
But the passion is what drove most of us to begin with. And when you hear stories like Andrea or Andrea, I keep going back and forth.
It's Andrea, but I'll
Andrea,
answer to
okay.
either. I'm just happy to be here.
You're very good.
Because
So,
I'd like to make the point that it's not competition from patients to any commercial market, because these aren't different flavors. We can't just exchange them. Certain strains will actually trigger seizures for me, and every seizure can be fatal.
Wow.
It's there, anything with distillate right now puts me at high risk. So there's a lot of products in the dispensaries that I'm not able to support. I'm not able to consume. And it would be unfair to you guys if you were responsible, even if medical dispensaries were responsible to carry every individual strain needed, because you cannot carry custom medication for every single person in the state. It's not realistic for the businesses. That'd be unfair. Home grow is the only option for some of this specialized medicine. It's not a competition. And there's, how many types of peppers are there out in the world? For those not familiar with cannabis, there's dozens and dozens of types of peppers. They're not all available in the grocery store. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to grow them at home. You can grow your ghost peppers if you want. It doesn't hurt any industry. Or if you have a child with a severe health disorder, you might take to gardening all of your own organic food at home.
Right on.
It's not something that every individual is going to do, because it's not realistic for every individual. But it's also unrealistic to think if someone has a garden at home, they're never going to go to a grocery store again. We need the balance of both.
You do. And you are such a great advocate for this. You always have these really good poignant points. The pharmaceutical drugs that you took before, what did they do to you? What were they intended to do, and what did they actually do?
Well, initially they were intended to control and stabilize the seizures that I was having. Because I was having dozens of seizures a day when they were diagnosed, and they had started in high school for me. And I went through almost a decade of pharmaceuticals where they were more often than not adding more pharmaceuticals to deal with the side effects of the ones I was already on. It ended up being a bit of a prescription cascade where we were just trying to cover side effects, and certain things that we assumed were side effects were actually permanent damage from the pharmaceuticals. The brain damage was a result of things not being properly managed while under pharmaceutical care. Cannabis has been an option for hope that they didn't really offer me. When I was first discussing medical cannabis with my actual medical providers, they were going to give me my card to keep me comfortable, was the way he had phrased it to
Right.
my mother and I. And at that point, we knew it could do more. I weaned down from 9 pharmaceuticals to 2. We knew it could do more. And I'm at the point where, with strain-specific medicine and custom formulations like this, I can stop a seizure while it's happening. But there's only enough medicine until it
Is that a
runs out.
dropper? Is that drop
This one's actually a
spray? Okay.
spray. That way, but I also have dropper formulations. That way, if I'm unwell and someone needs to administer it for me,
Mhm.
we have those options. I'd love to be able to finish my research and be able to convert it to a nasal spray, or have products like Canatol, which is a cannabis-based nasal spray for epilepsy that's available in other states on these shelves. But we really lost focus of what patients here need. We opted to prioritize the recreational program in a lot of ways, and including adjusting to 100-pound testing batch size. And a lot of modifications were made that were promised were temporary. And it's time to care about the patients again, because the industry does stand behind us. Both the CBA and the CTA have spoken in support of home grow. it's a bit of a fallacy to say that it's, you know, the industry isn't mature enough to handle patients having home grow.
Certainly we are, and I think certainly there is a center mass of folks who are getting there anyway. I think that, you know, the challenge we've had as an industry, whether we're talking going back to the beginning in 2009 to the recent passage of the referendum and enabling legislation, is just education, education, education. And for a lot of legislators, their only education is a Cheech and Chong movie, other types of stigmas. The local, you know, head coach of the football team is adamantly opposed, and they have a challenge with that. You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons, small constituencies that are influencing folks to just stay away from it. And they're not taking that added extra effort that the Senator Singleton has done, which is to learn and listen and talk and pull groups together. Senator, I know there's no singular answer here. We've had these conversations for a long time. We talk about, you know, contact your legislator, call your local legislator. And we see some growth, like just, again, I hadn't looked at your bill in a little while. I was really happy to see that the bipartisanship that you have built on this. You know, you have some very conservative folks, some very moderate folks, and very liberal folks. What more can you do? What more can we do to help you get others involved to sign onto that legislation and finally get some action?
So for those who are unaware, and again, Scott and I, we know this well, literally 3 numbers that matter in Trenton are 21, 41, and 1.
Right.
Because it takes 21 senators, 41 members of the assembly, and 1 governor to make something a law. I think if we continue to try and grow the number of people who are willing to step out in front and put their name up and say, yes, I support this as sponsors, I think that puts us in a unique position to be able to say we have a critical mass to be able to move something. There's a lot of people who will tell you they support something if the bill comes up, recognizing that they hope it never comes up.
That's exactly right.
But if we can start pressing people to begin to put their names on documents that say, yes, I want to sponsor this in both houses, if we can get to that point where we can get that critical mass, I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And for my friend Andrea, I'm hoping that win is so soon. And we're going to continue to fight on our behalf to make sure it is.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you pushing this bill, because I know a lot of people seem to have given up because home grow's been on the table for years and years now. It was with the original medical cannabis legislation, I believe, back in 2008. This is a long battle we've been fighting, and you're right, as much as we need people to call their legislators, we need our legislators to step up and actually co-sign the bill and let us know we have your support, that it's not just patients out here dying trying to change things.
And I know Senator Vitale has been, you know, a champion as well, and has pledged to support this and put it on his agenda. And oftentimes it doesn't stay on the agenda, actually every time. And I think that's one of those things. I think we just need to get that one hearing. And so look, I'm going to kind of wrap this up right now, because Andrea, every time I talk to you, I get choked up. I'm really proud of you for what you've been able to do for yourself, but also for patients everywhere. The benefit that you have as an advocacy, what you're bringing to the table, I want to make sure that we spotlight in a greater way. I'm going to reach out to my good friend here, Senator Singleton, to figure out other ways we can do that. There are things that you can do with hearings that don't require votes, just from an educational perspective, to really sort of bring that center mass. So I do want to work with you, Senator, on that. And I think, you know, the more voices we have and you know, talents like Kristen and Andrea here, to really do this in a very important way. So Senator, I'll give you any last words?
The fight goes on, and I'm looking forward to that fight. The fight goes on.
Amen. Amen. All right, Andrea, thank you again. You're going to be hearing from me very shortly. Kristen, thank you so much for all your advocacy. You know, you're a business person, but your compassion bleeds through really nice. And Senator, again, I appreciate your friendship and your leadership on this issue. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. This was going to be recorded, and we're going to be pushing this out on YouTube. So thanks everybody. I really appreciate your time.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Hey, Andrea, what's your phone number before Jenna hangs us up? What's your phone number?
Are we still live? Because I will type it to you in the private chat instead.
Let's,
Yes.
yes, we're still live, so why don't we do that?
I will just
No, no,
type.
no, Andrea, I'm gonna reach out to you separately. I forgot we're still live here. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for understanding.